Broken integrity always leaves a trail, even when no one else notices at first. And the first place it leaves a mark is in your inner system. When parts of you pull in opposite directions, life feels really heavy. One part of you wants to present as ambitious and trustworthy, but another part cuts corners to get ahead. One part wants love, but another hides the truth because honesty feels too risky. And those internal splits create a constant background noise. It's inner fragmentation. And over time, that noise erodes your confidence.
Welcome to Beyond Success, the podcast for high achievers seeking deeper meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, here's your host, world-renowned leadership coach and therapist, David Tian, Ph.D.
Let me ask you something. What's the cost of saying one thing but doing another? Not just the immediate fallout, not just whether someone finds out. I mean the deeper cost, the one that lives in your chest, that follows you into every room, that shows up in your sleep. Because there's always a cost. Sometimes it looks like anxiety. Sometimes it's that low hum of guilt that never quite shuts off. Sometimes it's the armor you have to wear just to feel okay in your own skin. Take somebody like Elizabeth Holmes, who built Theranos. She built her image around brilliance, innovation, and purpose. She raised hundreds of millions of dollars, became valued at billions, and became a symbol of success, a vision of the future. But underneath the pitch decks and the black turtlenecks, something wasn't lining up. The data didn't match the promise. The stories she told others didn't match what she told herself. And the more she doubled down on the performance, the harder it became to stop. Now, she's not the only one, of course, but the scale of her collapse makes something obvious. Without integrity, everything else is temporary. The empire might grow tall, but if the foundation's hollow, the fall is just a matter of time. In the last episode, we looked at the question, why be good? Not out of guilt, not out of duty, but because it leads to a better life. One where your values and actions align. One where your relationships rest on trust, not transaction. In this episode, we're digging into the virtue that holds all of that together. Integrity. Because without integrity, your ambition turns into a mask. Your talent gets used to cover up, not connect. And eventually the outer success outpaces the inner structure. That's where things start to crack. So let's ask the real question here. What happens when the exterior moves faster than the interior? What happens when what you show the world moves too far away from what you actually believe and who you really are? And what becomes possible when they finally come back into harmony? That's what this episode's about. I'm David Tian. I'm a Brown University certified leadership coach and a certified IFS therapy practitioner. And for almost the past 2 decades, I've been helping high achievers from over 87 countries master love, leadership, and life decisions by blending emotional mastery, philosophical wisdom, and evidence-based human connection strategies. And in this episode, I've got 4 points for you today. Here's the first. Integrity. What does it actually mean? And maybe more importantly, what doesn't it mean? A lot of people hear this word and immediately picture some rigid moral standard, or some pious guy lecturing everyone else on how to live. Or worse, this expectation that you can never slip up, or never falter, or never contradict yourself. That is not what I mean by integrity. That's either self-righteousness or perfectionism dressed up in moralistic language. Integrity, at its core, is actually much simpler. It means living in harmony with your values and principles, even when no one's looking. It's when what you say and what you do and what you believe line up. It's when your actions match what you claim to stand for. And it's when you don't need to contort yourself into excuses or explanations, because your life already reflects what you truly believe. Now, different traditions have described this in different ways. The Chinese virtue ethicists made it central. Confucius, for example, described the ideal person, the Junzi, not as someone who forces himself to do the right thing, but as someone who has cultivated himself so thoroughly that the right thing flows naturally from who he's become. He doesn't have to white-knuckle it. It's who he is. Mencius, or Mengzi, went even further. He said our moral nature is innate. The sprouts of compassion and fairness and integrity are already inside us. But like any sprout, they can wither if they're neglected. They need cultivation. They need attention. They need practice to grow strong. And 1,000 years later, Zhu Xi, the great Neo-Confucian thinker, made it practical. He emphasized Showshen, which is daily self-cultivation. He believed this was the foundation of moral life. Not once-in-a-while heroics, not grand gestures, but steady practice, looking inward each day and asking, where am I in alignment and where am I out of alignment? Integrity is when your words and actions flow from your deepest values, because you've trained yourself to be that kind of person, not the person who has to force compliance with some external rules or regulations, not the guy memorizing scripts just to get by on dates, not the manager who parrots the company values while secretly cutting corners, but instead the kind of person whose system, his inner system, his whole self, is in harmony, aligned. And here's where modern psychology adds another deeper layer. Internal family systems therapy shows us that most of us aren't a single unified voice. We're a system of parts. Sometimes those parts want different things. One part wants to please people. Another part wants to rebel. Another part wants safety. Another wants freedom. When those parts are at war, your integrity fractures. You say one thing in public, but another part of you acts out in private. Or you rationalize behavior that doesn't line up with your deeper commitments. The path to integrity, then, isn't about suppressing any of those parts. It's about integration. It's about bringing them into harmony so that what comes out of you isn't fragmented. So you're not living 2 or 3 different lives at once. Because that fragmentation, that's what eats away at fulfillment. I've seen this in both dating and leadership contexts. A guy in the dating world says he wants an honest, loving relationship, but then he hides parts of himself, exaggerates his lifestyle, or manipulates just to keep someone's interest. And he might get short-term attraction, but he won't get deeper or lasting fulfillment, because deep down he knows it's a ruse, it's a mask. Or in business, a leader declares that integrity is a core company value, but then he looks the other way when the numbers are fudged to hit a quarterly target. And his team sees that, and the message to them is clear. Integrity only applies when it's convenient. Morale erodes, trust erodes, and eventually, so does the team culture. The ironic thing is, integrity doesn't require extraordinary effort. It's actually less exhausting. You don't need to manage multiple stories or keep track of which mask you wore yesterday. You just live in congruence with your principles, and that alignment brings inner peace. So integrity isn't moral rigidity. It isn't about never making mistakes. Instead, it's about cultivating the kind of person who, more often than not, does the right thing without having to force it. And this comes from daily practice. It comes from bringing the inner and outer into harmony. That's what integrity really means. And it's the foundation for everything else we're going to be looking at in this mini-series. Okay, so I said earlier, I've got 4 points. We've just covered the first. Here's the second. Why integrity feeds fulfillment. Here's where integrity moves from being a nice-sounding concept to something with direct consequences for your happiness and fulfillment. Integrity builds self-trust, and self-trust is actually really rare. Most people think of trust in terms of whether others believe in them, but the deeper question is whether you believe in yourself. This lack of self-trust is actually at the root of almost all psychotherapeutic problems. Can you rely on your own word? Do you follow through on what you say you'll do? Or do you constantly leave yourself hanging? Without that self-trust, every decision carries extra weight. You hesitate, you second-guess, you spin in anxiety. And part of you, or parts of you, know why. You've given yourself evidence over and over that your words don't really carry much weight. That might sound harsh to some, but it's liberating once you see it clearly, because self-trust can be rebuilt. How? Through integrity. When you live with integrity, you free up massive mental bandwidth. You're not running simulations in your head about what happens if someone finds out you exaggerated, or if your partner discovers the text on your phone, or if your team realizes you cut corners. You just live. Your actions and words line up. That congruence creates stability inside of you, And stability, ironically, is what allows growth. Jonathan Haidt, the famous social psychologist, points out that happiness is moral and relational. It's not just dopamine hits or achieving goals. It's a sense of inner harmony that we get when we act with integrity vis-a-vis ourselves and with others. When we act with integrity or live with integrity, we reduce moral conflicts inside ourselves, which lowers stress hormones and helps us feel safe in our own skin. I've seen this play out with clients in both dating and in business. A guy tells me he wants a girlfriend who trusts him, then he plays little games. He shows up late, ghosts when he doesn't feel like dealing with her emotions, or delete texts so she won't see them. And then he wonders why their relationship never feels secure. The problem isn't just her lack of trust. The problem is that he doesn't trust himself enough to show up consistently and transparently. His integrity is fractured, and the relationship reflects it. On the leadership side, I worked with a founder who complained that his executive team didn't have his back. He said they were always jockeying for position, protecting themselves, never fully aligned with him. Then I dug deeper. Turns out he had promised equity to 3 different people in 3 different ways. He bent the truth whenever it gave him short-term leverage, and his executives could tell. They might not have compared notes out loud, but they at least felt it. And so the alliance with them was always fragile. No amount of strategy sessions or culture-building rah-rah retreats could fix what was missing at the core: integrity. Here's the blunt truth. When you keep saying what you should do and you never follow through, you're not just lying to other people, you're lying to yourself, and your unconscious keeps score. Every time you compromise your integrity, you tell yourself, I can't be trusted. It might be subtle. It might be as small as skipping the workout you swore you would do, or telling a white lie to avoid discomfort. But your unconscious logs it, and eventually, you look at yourself in the mirror and you doubt your own word. That's where that anxiety keeps creeping in. That's where the low self-worth builds up. Now contrast this with psychological congruence. When what you say, what you think, what you believe, what you feel, and what you do all line up, your nervous system relaxes. Your body knows it doesn't have to cover for you. You're not living in constant defense. You don't need to remember which story you told last time. You can just speak plainly because your life already backs it up. Coming to that level of congruence isn't easy at first, but it will make your life lighter almost immediately. It means you're not dragging around the weight of unresolved conflicts between your words and your actions and your beliefs. And that lightness is actually in itself a form of fulfillment. Think about the moments in your own life when you felt most confident. Chances are they weren't moments of performance per se. They were moments when you knew you were aligned, when you said what was true for you, and your actions followed through. That confidence wasn't about bravado. It was about integrity. It was about being proud of yourself, for real. And this is why integrity is foundational for fulfillment, because fulfillment requires peace of mind. It requires relationships that you know you can count on. It requires a sense of stability inside of you that doesn't crumble when circumstances get tough. Without integrity, everything else feels unstable. Your career, your relationships, even your own identity. You're always managing appearances, always negotiating, always hustling to keep the cracks from showing. That is not fulfillment. That is actually survival. With integrity, you don't have to play that game. You can build trust in yourself. And when you trust yourself, others feel it and learn to trust you too. That's the soil where love grows. That's the foundation of leadership that lasts. And that's why integrity isn't just a moral virtue. It's a practical necessity for fulfilling life. So the question isn't whether integrity makes you look good. The question is whether you want to live with peace, stability, fulfillment, and relationships and alliances you can actually count on. Because if you do, then integrity isn't optional. It's the way to get there.
Many high achievers struggle when it comes to managing their emotions or navigating their relationships, and they hit a wall when it comes to emotional mastery. Maybe you've noticed that stress, frustration, or anger is seeping into your personal or professional life. or you feel disconnected from those you care about. That's where David Tian's Emotional Mastery Program comes in. It's based on peer-reviewed, evidence-backed therapeutic methods to help you find happiness, love, and real fulfillment. Learn how to break free from the emotional roller coaster and start thriving in every area of your life. You can find out more at davidtianphd.com/emotional mastery. That's DAVIDTIANPhD.com/emotional mastery.
And here's the third point: the true consequences of broken integrity. Broken integrity always leaves a trail, even when no one else notices at first. And the first place it leaves a mark is in your inner system. When parts of you pull in opposite directions, life feels really heavy. One part of you wants to present as ambitious and trustworthy, but another part cuts corners to get ahead. One part wants love, but another hides the truth because honesty feels too risky. And those internal splits create a constant background noise. It's inner fragmentation. And over time, that noise erodes your confidence. Every small compromise plants a question in your mind. Can I trust myself? It's rarely loud. It's usually subtle, like almost a whisper. But these whispers pile up. You hesitate before making decisions. You doubt your own promises. You start to feel you're living on shaky ground, even if no one else sees it on the outside. And it doesn't stop there. The external consequences always follow. People stop fully believing your words. They might nod politely, but the weight isn't there anymore. Trust erodes. Relationship stays surface level because the real you never actually shows up. You might still have partners, colleagues, or friends, but the bond feels conditional, thin. Confucian thinkers warned about this 2,000 years ago. They taught that small betrayals of self, like cutting corners, lying to yourself, avoiding responsibility, they might feel harmless in the moment, but over time they add up. And once they accumulate, they pull your character apart. That's why they emphasized Showshen, or self-cultivation, starting with everyday honesty and restraint. Self-cultivation. Because if you can't stay aligned in the small things, the big things eventually collapse. Give an example. I had a client who learned this the hard way. Let's call him Victor. Victor was a sharp guy in his mid-30s, working at a major firm, and on the surface, he had it all together. A high salary, he was articulate, ambitious, but when he came to me, he admitted he was exhausted and constantly anxious. His dating life was a mess too. He wanted intimacy, but every relationship fizzled out after a few months. As we worked together, a pattern emerged. At work, he made promises to clients he knew he couldn't keep. He told his team he'd back them up, then left them exposed when deadlines hit. And with women, he said he wanted something serious, but he kept multiple dating apps active and he flirted on the side. He told himself these were all small things. Everyone does it. It's no big deal. But the toll became obvious. He couldn't relax. He worried constantly about being found out by his team, by his boss, by the auditors, by the women he dated. He lived with a constant gnawing tension that drained him. His nervous system was stuck in defense mode. He wasn't sleeping well. His workouts dropped off. And he started feeling hollow in social settings. What Victor didn't realize was that his real problem wasn't anxiety. It was broken integrity. He had created a fragmented self. The person he wanted to be and the person he acted like were very different, and he paid for it every day. Once he began to face this honestly, things in his life started shifting. We started small. He picked one area to bring back into alignment, honoring his word at work. He stopped over-promising, even when it felt uncomfortable. He set realistic deadlines, and when he couldn't meet them, he owned up early instead of trying to hide it. At first, this terrified him. He thought the clients would leave. He thought his boss would be furious and fire him. Instead, something else happened. His clients actually respected his honesty. His team trusted him more, and he started sleeping better at night, as proven by his Whoop band. From there, he carried that same practice into his dating life. He deleted the extra apps. He told one woman he was seeing that he wasn't ready to commit, instead of stringing her along. Again, it felt brutal in the moment, but what followed was relief. And for the first time in years, he began building a relationship that actually felt safe. Victor learned that integrity wasn't about moral perfection. It was about inner harmony. When his words and actions and beliefs lined up, the anxiety faded. His confidence grew because he could finally trust himself. That's the cost of broken integrity. Fragmentation inside, erosion of confidence, loss of trust from others. And that's the gift of integrity. Congruence, stability, harmony, and relationships that can actually last. So if you've been feeling anxious, or like success is hollow, or like your connections never quite stick, ask yourself, where am I out of alignment? Where am I saying one thing and doing another? Where am I not living up to my core values? Because these small fractures add up, and the sooner you face them, the sooner you can rebuild the kind of character that not only others can trust, but that you can trust too. Now for the fourth and final point, how to cultivate integrity. Cultivating integrity isn't something you just decide once and then you're set for life. It's not a personality trait that you're either born with or without. It's more like fitness. You can't just say, I went to the gym once last year, so I'm good. Integrity works the same way. It's daily practice. It's reps. The first step is to clarify your non-negotiable values. What values do you actually want to build your life on? A lot of people, surprisingly, never pause to even ask this in any kind of serious way. They drift into adulthood living by values they unconsciously absorbed from family or culture or usually peers, and then they wonder why their life feels so empty or misaligned. If you don't define your values, then someone else already has. So start with 3. Write them down, and don't just list abstract words like honesty or courage. Define what each one looks like in practical action. Integrity should be on that list. Hopefully you understand why by now. Spell it out. Maybe integrity means to you, I don't make promises that I can't keep. Or maybe it means, I don't tell stories to make myself look better, especially at someone else's expense. Or I admit mistakes instead of trying to hide them. The point is to move integrity out of the clouds and into the ground, into concrete behaviors you can actually measure yourself against. Once you've clarified your core values, the next step is to track your small commitments. Don't break promises to yourself. This is where most people go wrong. They assume integrity only applies to the big moral dilemmas, like whether to lie in court or cover up a scandal. But the truth is, integrity gets built in the micro moments. You say you'll wake up at 7 a.m., and then you snooze until 8. You tell yourself you'll eat better, but you keep blowing it off. Every time you break those small promises, your unconscious takes note. You teach yourself that your word doesn't really matter, and that self-doubt bleeds into everything else. So, start keeping score, not to shame yourself, but to build integrity. Write down the commitments you make, even the small ones. At the end of the day, check, did I follow through? If yes, celebrate it, reward yourself. If no, note it and reset. The point isn't perfection. The point is awareness. The third practice is to run daily integrity tests. Ask yourself, where am I tempted to fake it today? Or what's the more honest choice, even if it's uncomfortable? These questions aren't about catching yourself doing something wrong. They're about giving yourself reps, because choosing truth over image in these small moments is how you build the muscle for when the stakes are higher. For example, in dating, maybe the integrity test is telling someone you're not interested instead of just ghosting them. Maybe it's difficult or awkward, but it aligns with who you want to be, your core values. In leadership, maybe it's admitting to your team that a deadline was unrealistic, instead of spinning the numbers to try to save face. Each time you choose truth, you reinforce that you can be trusted, even or especially by yourself. Finally, we can borrow from Confucian philosophy here. Zhengzi, one of Confucius's disciples, said, I examine myself daily. That's the ancient practice of self-cultivation, or Showshen. The idea is that you don't wait for big crises to test your character. You check in every day. What did I promise? Did I keep it? Where did I fall short? What can I do differently tomorrow? This daily examination works like a mirror. It keeps you honest about who you are and who you're becoming. And over time, it builds moral congruence. Your inner life and your outer life come into harmony. And that's where the deep peace comes from. Not from never messing up, but from knowing you're actively working to stay true to your true self. Cultivating integrity isn't glamorous. No one applauds you for getting out of bed when you said you would, or for admitting you blew a deadline. But those small acts of integrity accumulate. They build a foundation of self-trust. And from there, fulfillment becomes possible. It leads into fulfillment naturally because you're no longer at war with yourself. So that's the practice. Clarify your values, track your commitments, run your daily integrity tests, monitor daily. Do that consistently, and you won't need to perform integrity anymore. You'll embody it naturally, and that congruence is worth more than any quick wins. Let me illustrate this with a client. Let's call him Daniel. Daniel, on paper, looked like he was set. He was in his late 30s, steadily moving up the ladder in a multinational company. He was earning a pretty high salary, living in a nice condo, getting a good bonus every year, flying business class regularly. If you just looked at his resume or his Instagram profile, you'd think he had it all figured out. But in reality, he was barely sleeping. He carried this constant anxiety in his chest. And no matter how many deals he helped to close or how much recognition he got at work, it never actually settled down. And when we dug into it, what we found wasn't a lack of talent or drive, of course. His problem was integrity, or rather, it was the lack of it. He had built his life on performance and calculation. Everything was optimized for image and strategy. But when we looked closer under the surface, it became obvious that he was avoiding the hardest conversations, especially in his personal life. He was dating multiple women at once, not because he wanted an open relationship, but because he was afraid of being alone. Even when he'd lose interest in someone, he would keep stringing her along. He said what he thought she wanted to hear. He kept the attention coming and avoided telling the truth. It was easier for him to fake it than risk disappointing someone, or worse, facing his own loneliness. But the cost of that dishonesty was showing up everywhere else. His body was tense all the time. He felt disconnected even from himself. He couldn't fully relax with anyone because part of him knew he was hiding. Once he saw this pattern for what it was, he had a choice. Keep pretending or commit to living in integrity. Fortunately, he chose integrity, and that meant taking the risk of being honest, even when it hurt. So he told women the truth, even when it meant losing their interest. He admitted when he wasn't ready for more, instead of stringing them along. He let go of the safety nets he'd been holding on to for years. And almost immediately, his life started to change. He began sleeping a lot better. His shoulders loosened. He felt lighter. For the first time in years, he liked the man he saw in the mirror. And here's what really surprised him. Once he started practicing integrity in his personal life, he noticed how much he had been avoiding it at work, too. He'd been smoothing over conflicts, playing office politics, and sidestepping the hard conversations with his superiors. So he made the same commitment there. Tell the truth, even or especially when it's uncomfortable. That decision opened doors he didn't think were even possible. Within a year, he was offered a leadership role he assumed was many years away. He thinks it's not because he became more strategic, but because people around him started trusting him in a new way. They knew where he stood. They knew his word meant something. Daniel's story isn't unique. The breakthroughs didn't come from a productivity hack or some new dating technique. They came from rebuilding his life on consistent principles. He made harder decisions. He told the truth often, and especially when it was most difficult. And once he aligned his words and actions and values, his anxiety lifted, his health improved, his relationships deepened, and both personally and professionally, he discovered opportunities that only appear when people know and feel in their gut that they can trust you. That's the real payoff of integrity. It's not about looking virtuous. It's not about being perfect. It's about finally being at peace with yourself so you can truly enjoy the success you've been working so hard for. To recap, integrity isn't something you perform for others. It's not a badge or a slogan. It's something you embody consistently over time. When your words, your actions, and your values line up, you build trust in yourself. That trust makes you steady, reliable. Others trust you to hold up your alliance. It makes your relationships safer and deeper. It even improves your health because you're no longer carrying the weight of hiding, pretending, or juggling different versions of yourself. And when you don't live with integrity, you fracture. You start doubting yourself. Other people doubt you too. Relationships stay shallow because the real you never shows up. That's why integrity isn't optional if you want fulfillment. It's the ground you stand on. So I'll leave you with 2 questions. Where in your life are you incongruent with your core values? And what might transform if you brought those parts back into harmony? For some of you, the answer might be in your dating life, like finally telling the truth about what you actually want. For others, it might be in leadership, stopping the small compromises that slowly eat away at your credibility. This is the work of integrity. It's not glamorous, it's not flashy, but it's the foundation for a life you can actually feel good living. In the next episode, we'll take this another step further, because integrity won't last without courage. Courage is the emotional strength that allows integrity to hold, especially when it costs you something in the short run. We'll dive into how courage works, why it matters, and how to build it. So stick around. If integrity is the foundation, courage is what keeps it standing when the pressure hits. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, hit a like or give it a good rating on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you have any questions whatsoever or any feedback at all, leave a comment or send me a message. I'd love to get your feedback. And if this has helped you in any way, please share it with anyone else that you think could benefit from it. Thank you again so much for listening. I look forward to welcoming you to the next episode. Until then, David Tian, signing out.